One thing I'm curious about, and I know other people are going to be curious about is, and we get a little bit, but so Bob, you are a master of wine, an MW. So what I'm curious is if you can sort of help me understand what is a master of wine, because I did mention to some folks, I'm like, I'm gonna have this amazing guy, he's a master of wine, and a couple of people like, oh wow, cool, a sommelier, and I was like, no, 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 no. So, and there's nothing wrong with
No.
sommeliers; they're incredibly talented, but it's different than a master of wine or even somebody that comes from WSET. So maybe if you can help educate me a little bit more about what a master of wine is.
Sure. You want to hear that now?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. So here's how things play out. The W set and the Master of Wine, and the Master of Sommelier, they all have origins that tie back to the UK, to London. Okay, so the with the W set, the diploma level of the W set for many people is the entry point into the Master of Wine program.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if you have the diploma, that's kind of giving you a pipeline into starting the Master of Wine program. 20 plus years ago, I was given an entrance exam for the Master of Wine.
Mm.
It was like few essay questions. I submitted this. They came back to me and they said, you can enter the program. The Master of Wine program then has first year assessment. If you make your way through that, you go to year two. Or they may say, come back and resit year one. Or they may say, sit out a year and then come back. So
Wow.
the feedback will vary. Then you go into the second year assessment. And if you make your way through that, that allows you to sit the exam. But to your question, the difference between Master Sommelier and Master Wine is significant. Master Sommelier is primarily based on focus on the food service industry. So it's a lot of people tied to restaurants. And because the restaurants oftentimes are high profile, the Master Sommelier is kind of a known value. Master of Wine is a lot more theoretical. You can find people who are importers, they're retailers, they're winemakers. They can be from all facets of the wine industry. The exams are very different. The Master Sommelier is an oral exam. You sit in front of a panel, they ask you questions, and you need to identify 6 wines. Okay, the Master of Wine program, it's several components, but one is written essays. There are multiple days of written essays, and it could pertain to the vineyard, to the wine cellar, to business of wine, which could be like health and social issues, influence of government on the wine trade, a whole number of things. And the blind tasting for the Master of Wine is 3 days, a total of 36 wines that must be identified.
When you say 36 wines that you actually have to, I guess a blind tasting.
12 per day.
Wow.
So, and the questions are things like, and you know, it's not like name this chateau. Okay. It's not that. It's more of, okay, you have, for the following wines, what are the grape variety or varieties, the place of origin, the vintage, the method of production, the influence of weather, aging potential, all of these kind of things come into play. And what you solely focus on is, okay, what is in the glass? What am I detecting? So you don't need to be spot on, but you better be directionally correct. And each one of the elements needs to tie together to a cohesive conclusion.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Yeah, well, I can see why. And I remember doing a little sort of poking on the Master of Wine, and you can correct me if I think generally the statistics were it was something like there was like 417 in the world Masters of Wine, and in the United States, there's something like is it 47 or something in the 40s or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, it's around, yeah, 40 something. I was number 19.
Wow.
I think there's like 52 or something like that in North America. There's 6 or 8 in Canada, one in Mexico, and 40 something in the US.
Yeah, I remember looking or seeing that, and there was a little blurb on something. So it said there was 40 some odd masters of wine, and I think it was in the United States. Maybe it did include all of North America. But then the next sentence was like, there's only like 52 astronauts in the United States. So it just goes to show you how rare, that type of certification is. I thought that was pretty wild.
Yeah, it's.
You're in rarefied air in the
I mean,
stratosphere, pun intended.
I mean, I feel very fortunate to have made my way through, and it really is quite life changing in terms of career and personal too. It's significant role in my life, but there are times where I think to myself, like, man, how did I do that?
That's an interesting question, but the question I'm curious about is why did you do that? Because it's a pretty, intense thing to do.
Yeah, it was years of having a second full time job, and for me, uh, I love everything about wine. The whole wine culture I find really appealing. And I thought, well, if I'm going to spend my life in this space, uh, I might as well try to, you know, grab the gold ring and really go for it. Um, I guess, there were times where I'd have to say, I thought, I don't have a snowball's chance in hell of passing this because you have days that are good days, bad days. You do a lot of practicing, blind tasting, and some days it's like, oh my God, I just knocked that out of the park. I'm feeling great. And next time you bomb, you think, this is not going to go well. Um, and the way that the exam is structured, it's written in a very deliberate, tactful way where if you have weaknesses, it'll expose your weaknesses.
Mm.
So when the term master of wine, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a subject matter expert on anything with wine, but you're competent in every aspect. Now, the thing is, most everyone does have an area where it's a specialty and they're at a high level. Um, but it's really about being very well rounded, having a global perspective, and it's about like the essays. It's compare and contrast, and it's understanding that what may work for one person, a guy making Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand, may not work for somebody producing Sauvignon Blanc in Loire. So it's about understanding that the pathway to success can be achieved in a number of ways.
Mm. So has that always sort of been part of you? It sounds like there's a tremendous amount of curiosity with you, and we talk about sort of core values and what this podcast is. So I'm kind of curious if you ever sort of thought about the core values that you have and that sort of how that impacted some of the things that you do.
Oh, completely. It's always being curious, always knowing there's more to learn. You never know it all. And with wine, that's certainly true. There's always new producers, there's new production methods, there's every year you reshuffle the deck with new vintages. So there's always something new to explore. And I've spent the last 40 years traveling the world, and I've worked for mega companies, and I've been a small independent guy as well, like I am now. So, seeing the different aspects of how the wine industry functions, uh, find it really fascinating. But then you also have, there's a long history, and you have a business aspect, and there's religion and a culinary piece and politics, and there's all these moving pieces to it. And I think for some people, they may look at it and feel like, there's too much here, and maybe you focus on one segment. When you go through the Master of Wine program, it's really about having a very broad, holistic view. And I think if you have a curious mind, and you can accept the fact that sometimes you're just not going to know the answer, or sometimes you may think you know the answer and you're wrong, is a quality that'll take you a long way. I think it takes you a long way in something like the MW program, and for me personally, it's taken me a long way in life. So,
Well, that's very cool. And it's funny because, we sort of met each other through your YouTube channel, which everybody's got to go check out. If they have a chance, just look up Bob Polinsky and you'll find stuff. Because I'm currently going through the WSET program, so I'm trying to absorb everything
yeah,
I can. And I've stumbled onto your channel, and I watch it quite a bit. And as I was saying earlier, I'm going to pick up some of the wines that you reviewed. But the other thing that
cool.
struck me was, not only does your curiosity come through, and again, this is just sort of observations that I'm curious, and that's why I'm really thankful that you're here because I wanted to talk about this. But not only your
Sure.
curiosity comes through, there's authenticity that comes through with what you do. And the other thing that really strikes me is that why would this individual want to do these videos? Because you're really educating a lot of people on a lot of things, and your videos are fun and enjoyable. And the one you did with Susan Lynn, I think it was, the
Yes.
tasting you did, that was pretty wild. It was cool
Yeah.
stuff. So what was it in you that said, I gotta do, because I think you have like something over 200 videos or something. So what is it, what was it that started
You know,
started within you?
I think it's partly it's a bit of the challenge of, an old dog learn a new trick. It's a little bit of that. I kind of view YouTube as being more of a younger person's space. I don't know if that's really true. Uh, and the
Huh.
thought of,
Look at these faces.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I watched a video a couple days ago, some guy talking about starting a YouTube channel over the age of 40. And I'm thinking, over 40? Um, you know,
Yeah, we got that
okay,
beat.
let me go back a couple of decades. But no, I think a lot of it with YouTube is, you know, can I have some relevance in a space that I'm really not that familiar with? There's a skill set needed. There's a lot of moving pieces to how YouTube operates, with the algorithm and SEO and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to learn, and I think it's always a good exercise when you're learning, and along the way, if there's a dose of humility, that's a good thing as well. And the other aspect, the other reason why I chose to do this, uh, it's been 20 plus years since I passed the MW exam, and I'm still active. I work in the wine trade now. I have an import company, and that's where I spend most of my time. Uh, so there's things that I think I've forgotten as time has gone on. So this channel really forces me, in a sense, to go back and research some things that I think, okay, I haven't thought about this in years.
Mm.
So it's a little bit of a refresher for me at times. And then the other piece I think is just, you know, if I'm putting myself out there on YouTube, you know, somehow I just think it's like a bit of personal growth as well.
Why
So
is that important to you?
I just think, if you're always kind of growing and putting yourself out there and challenging yourself, sometimes you may stumble a bit, but just the fact that you're doing it, I think, and again, speaking for myself personally, uh, I find value in it. It's always trying to broaden the horizons and stretch yourself a bit. And anyway, I think there's a number of reasons. And the way it's played out, I'm really quite surprised. People have been extremely supportive. And look, the fact is, I'm a tiny channel. Good Lord, I'm only, 12,000 subscribers is nothing. Um, but you start out, you're like a grain of sand on the beach.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm 2 grains now. Um, but it's a crazy space because it's so overloaded with like every topic. And the question that I get over and over is, oh, so Bob, which YouTube channels for wine do you watch?
Oh, that's interesting.
And the fact is, none.
Why do you do that? Are
Because
you would you be curious about how other people sort of present wine?
uh, not really. I mean, I want it to, I want my channel to be pure. I want it to be, my own take on things. Now, I will check to say, oh, here's a topic that people are interested in. Okay, that I'll do. But I don't listen to any other channels. I listen to YouTube a lot, but it's always like, other topics. But in the wine space, no,
Well,
no.
and I do obviously, but there's only a handful of voices that are there. So I think the where you're exploring is actually pretty cool because it's not like an overly saturated. It doesn't seem to be. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But when I look for wine education and I look for sort of wine insights and inspirations, there's typically a couple that come through, and you're one of them. So which is
Mm.
kind of neat. And what I appreciate about your work is that I definitely feel there's an authenticity that comes through. And that's another reason why I'm very thankful that you want to sort of have a conversation today. And one of the things, and I may have mentioned to you this before, I think it's pretty funny when you do the cork throw. I don't know if
You
that was something
know,
that was planned or you
it
just usually do that and you sort of
it
capture it or
happened. It happened one day, and I really didn't even think about it. And I saw in the comments there were half a dozen people or something. It's all like laughing faces, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, you know. But what people don't realize, there's actually this large pail behind me, which I never hit. You know, so
well,
yeah.
I guess the follow-up question that I would imagine somebody would have is do you ever have to put a cork back in the bottle or is that not an issue?
I don't. I never reuse the cork. I use glass stoppers.
Oh, okay. All right. I
Yeah,
actually invested in like a Corvin, the gas one. I got one of those because I'm trying to taste more wines and I like I said I'm pretty frugal with that stuff. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I got. I got the six too, and it came and my wife said, "Why did you buy this?" And I said, "Well, to save, to save wines if I don't drink it." She's like, we drink the bottle as soon as it's open. We never usually have leftover wine." And I'm like, well, number one, I'm trying to like reduce costs, and number two, I don't want to be, drinking
yeah,
constantly when I'm tasting wines and things of that nature. So I just thought it was funny.
sure,
She's like, why would you
sure.
buy that?
Yeah, yeah.
So
That thing works. That works well.
the Corvette? Yeah, it does. It is pretty
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
it's kind of a pain, and there's parts of it that you need to maintain. So I use it on occasion with some older high-end wines. But it's actually typically with older wines, I prefer to drink them when they're open. Uh, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
Mhm, mhm. So it's funny as we're talking. You mentioned relevance and there's authenticity that comes through. Have you sort of reflected back on some of the work that you've done in YouTube and even in your career, and say, are there constant themes that you've hit upon over the course of your career in terms of who you are and how you want to come across?
Uh, you know, I don't know if this is something I've really thought about a whole lot.
Oh, that's just good then.
But but I'll say this. I spent 20 years or so. I owned a retail store, a wine shop, old school brick and mortar dinosaur business model. Know virtually everyone who walks in the door, and it's all about talking to people and connecting with them, listening and then trying to provide something of value to them. And someone comes in and they're looking to spend $20 on something, I want them to be satisfied with what they've bought. And I think for wine, oftentimes there's a bit of uh, there's a lot of learning that goes with it, And I mean, for instance, if you're someone who's interested in music, okay, I can listen to it and appreciate it. I can't play an instrument, I don't know it with a lot of depth. But for me, I still get personal enjoyment out of it. And what I find with wine is people are just naturally curious. They want to know some tidbit of information. And I get satisfaction from providing that. And I think what's happened is as the years have gone by and I transitioned out of being someone who owned a retail store, uh, a lot of that now has been connected through, I do a lot of like lectures. I do, blind tasting events for different businesses. I've been an instructor in the MW program for many years. And I think the YouTube piece of it is just an extension of that. It's, I find it quite gratifying when I'm talking to someone about wine, and it could be some seemingly mundane tidbit of information, but you can see on their face they have a bit of this aha moment. It's like, that is really cool. And I'm thinking, okay, good, spread the word.
Man, so I hope you don't mind me saying these things, and you can tell me to go fly a kite if you think I'm off base. But when we're talking, I'm hearing a lot of things like gratitude, giving back. So I'm curious to understand if this is something that has always been a part of you, or did you see that developing over the years?
I, no, I think it's always, excuse me, I think it's always been there, but I think in recent years it's been amped up. Um,
Why so?
I think part of it may be a function of age. That may be part of it. Also, back in 2020, I was down with COVID for an extended period of time. And, I think it was traumatic enough that um, maybe some things that I took for granted, I'm not taking for granted anymore.
Oh,
Uh, but there's days, I laugh about it now, but there's days where God, I just slept 12 hours and what am I gonna do the next 12 hours? Oh, I think I'm gonna get ready to go back to bed, you know? So I think that experience, I think that's probably brought some degree of change, but it's always been there.
yeah. Well, you can hear it when you talk about the retail side. So I worked in retail when I was younger, and that's not an easy business. That's a tough business. It takes a certain sort
Yeah,
of mindset to be in that world, and a lot of it has to do with being of service to others. And I can see this YouTube channel being a much grander scale of what you probably were doing in your retail shop.
it is. It is. But the difference being, uh, in a retail shop, you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone. So you're connecting with them, you're looking at each other and you're having a conversation. With YouTube, it's a bit of a different story, because on my end, I'm completely transparent. You can see who I am. You know, you may like my channel, you may hate it, whatever, but you remain anonymous. In most cases, I don't know who's watching. Uh, Now, within the channel now, there's a lot of dialogue with people. So there's quite a small but vibrant community. So there's people that I talk to several times a week. Uh, and as time has gone on, I've discovered some things about them. And in a way, I think, we've even created some friendships. Uh, but it's different because, I'm kind of the open book, and the other side is whatever they want to be. They can be completely anonymous, or they can be, you know, fully engaged in the conversation. So that's a bit of a twist.
There's always a twist. What would you want people to know about you so that they maybe don't initially see or hear through the YouTube channel? What would be something you want people to know about you?
Um, I mean, for me, like, my personal background, I'm from Detroit. Um, you know, blue collar, middle class sort of family. No connection to wine whatsoever. I ended up getting into the wine business through a job I had as a high school kid, and there was someone who at this store that kind of took me under their wing, so to speak. Um, and over the years, I've moved a lot. There was a time in my life where I think I had 9 homes in 11 years.
What?
Yeah, and this is all like, corporate jobs, and there's a lot of moving. I've lived in Australia. Uh, I worked in Australia not all that many years ago, and I've lived all around the U.S. I've traveled an insane amount. Just a couple of weeks ago, I came back from Europe. I was in Portugal and Poland, and if I'm counting correctly, that was my 40th trip to Europe.
Wow.
Um, so, traveling and living out of a suitcase, it sounds strange, but I like it.
Your passport must be pretty wild with all the stamps and everything else.
Well, I've got the brand new one now. I just got the new one like a month ago.
Ah,
And if you still have the old one,
yeah.
when you renew, you'll see it's completely different.
Oh, so what is your, the great thing I think about that is you've met people all over the world. So are there common sort of things that you see through people throughout the world that maybe, you know, uh, you didn't realize before, or you thought, hey, listen, there is a sort of a common thread that goes through all of us, regardless of where we are.
Oh, I think definitely. Like, look, I think for most people, and if I'm tying this to wine, look, wine is like it's like a common bond. It's something that it's tied to an enjoyable part of your life. Oftentimes tied to a meal, friendship, family, that sort of thing. I mean, it's the type of thing that most people put a high value on. So, I mean, I've you know, sharing a meal with someone and drinking some wine, there's a 99.9% chance you're going to have a good experience, and you're going to find there's a lot of common ground, and oftentimes you walk away with a bit more of a broader perspective. One of the things that I found interesting that happened not all that long ago, so maybe it's a bit top of mind. Uh, I was in Southeast Asia, and I was in Malaysia, and I was talking to a guy there who is a som in one of the upscale restaurants there. And I was talking to him about the strange food, to me, the strange food and wine combinations that are acceptable in that market. I mean, it's 95% red wine. And I'm thinking, God, these food combinations with the wine just, they're very strange. And he said, well, you have to understand where we're coming from. This is what we've always drank. In Asian markets, it is predominantly red wine, heavily focused on French, primarily Bordeaux. And he said, we drink this with anything and everything, and we find it enjoyable and it works. And I thought, if it's enjoyable and if you think it works, that's all that matters. I mean, I'm viewing it as someone who's not familiar with with that mindset. And it's like, the issue's with me, not with them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think this world of wine is super interesting because there's so many different things to explore. And I try to get through the stereotype of the stuffy wine person because there's so much that you can learn about this. And that's what I find very appealing. That's why I started going down this journey. And the other thing is a lot of the times the people that I encounter in this world or through this experience, they're sometimes they're the most warmest, interesting, uh, you know, inquisitive, and deep thinking and sort of emotionally connected people. I mean, maybe that's a bad generalization, but they just seem very sort of into the people and the land and the product and what's happening. And it's not that I see that in a lot of different industries, that I've encountered. So to me, it's very refreshing when I explore this world.
There again with the wine world, it's always tough to paint with a broad stroke. But you're right about the part where there are countless small artisanal type producers.
Mm.
And many times they have a link back to a specific place, that it's been handed through the generations in many cases. And in, in some regard, you look at what these people do and how they exist, essentially they're farmers.
Yeah, yeah.
And you better be connected to the land, and especially with what's going on in the world today, where you have global warming issues, which you can actually argue in some wine regions it's actually benefited the wine region. At least it has for the short term. Long term, that certainly will be a different story. But there's always these challenges too, where the interest of the consumer has changed, and you know people more and more want to know like where their food sources are coming from and how was something produced. So wine is like the tip of the spear because it's very much a reflection of its place of origin.
Yeah, like the canary in the coal mine, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty.
you know
It is pretty amazing. And the other thing I like about exploring this world is that intensity, but also, it literally changes all the time. So I in my backyard, there's the Finger Lakes, and even New Jersey has some wineries that are popping now that are getting some attention. But
yep.
I can go to a producer in the Finger Lakes and have an Arcatzelli or a Chardonnay in one year and have a fabulous experience, and then the next year it can be a completely different wine, same grape, same sort of labeling, but when you try it, it's a whole different experience, and that's pretty interesting.
But there's a whole range of factors that can come into play. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you might be thinking, oh, well, and when people talk vintage, really what you're talking about is weather conditions.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the weather like that year? Okay, that's one factor. But you can have it's a different winemaker. They're using some different sort of winemaking process this year. If it's someone who is going more this natural route and they're using, ambient yeast, it's like, okay, there's a lot of things that can go sideways.
Right.
So, you know, i- the variation from year to year, look, if you're buying something like non-vintage champagne, okay, that is built on being the same every year.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's through very detailed, specific blending.
Yeah.
But you look at a lot of other wines, they're not built that way. And there's in that wine is really going to be a snapshot in time.
Which is really
And
cool. And
yeah,
that's why I like sort of those boutique, sort of wine producers. Because you're right, we can't get the mass produced stuff or the wines that have more consistency. But going to a place and seeing and understanding that variability is kind of cool. So yeah, it's another reason why I sort of like this exploring this area. I do have one question, and I hope you'll entertain me. in a lot of your videos, and I see you in this perspective on the wall in the back. There's a flag there, and there's some other things that are underneath that flag.
Mm.
So it's over your, I guess, your right shoulder. I'm seeing, again, I do this with, audio. I don't. People may not see the video, or you may put the video out, but there's a flag on that wall, and I'm curious, what is that? What is that from?
That's from my father's funeral.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's been gone for 40 years. Uh, but the photos are like old family photos. Uh, it's graduations and weddings and all these kind of things. Some of those photos are 100 years old.
Wow.
Uh, and the times that I've traveled and moved multiple times, that's the one thing that comes with me.
Oh really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think because it kind of gets me, rooted, and it just I don't know, I find it kind of uplifting, because it's this wall kind of just represents, my my time on the planet, and the people that are near and dear to me.
Bob, there's a lot of layers to you. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that because I've always every single time I'm on the video and you have that angle, I'm like, what is that? So
Yeah. It's times I think, God, it looks a little busy. Uh, then I thought, what the hell? I mean, it's it's there, and it's just kind of part of who I am. So
exactly. That's why I was curious because it's great that you have that up there, and that's why it's sort of there's always a story when you have something up, right? So I was just curious what that story was
yeah,
behind there. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
A couple things that as we sort of wrap up this conversation, and hopefully we can have a couple more of these. I think they'll be pretty fun. Um, can you let me know who would have been your heroes as you were growing up, or your heroes now? Who are some of your heroes?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people would say this. Look at my parents. Good parents, and always there, always supportive. I think that's an important foundational piece. Um, in terms of like other heroes, I can think maybe back to years when I was a little kid. Uh, there might have been some athletes or something. I mean, somebody you look at and think, wow. I mean, back when I was a little kid, I always thought like, and I think he called himself the greatest, but I always thought like Muhammad Ali was like the coolest guy there was. Um, but as I've gotten older, nah, I don't think I really have any heroes. It's just a matter of trying to live your life in a way where you feel like you're adding value, you're being a decent person, you're empathetic, and just these sort of traits that, okay, this is how you need to operate as a person.
Mm.
Uh, and those are things that are just instilled from early days.
I wish most people have more of that understanding. If somebody was listening, what would be one or two key takeaways that you would want somebody listening to our conversation to walk away with?
Now, are you talking specific to wine or just?
Whatever you would like. Could be wine, could not be wine.
Okay, well, if I link it to wine, um, because wine is really, it's been my life, for my entire working life. I think with wine, the thing that is interesting that goes even beyond just drink itself, uh, and it gets back to a little bit of what you mentioned, with some of these wine producers that you've met with. Uh, it's about the long game. It's about perseverance and consistency, and you take things that maybe have failed, and you change them and go forward, and hopefully get a better result the next time through. So I think that part of it is interesting in the wine world because it's not stagnant. You know, it's very much moving, and when it's moving, the complexity is always there. And then the other that I would say, I'll tie it back to the MW program. Uh, that's also tied to uh, having a degree of humility, uh, the perseverance part. You know, very, very few people get through that program uh, without without there being pain points. And you know, I think that part of it is a good thing because it really uh, instills something in you where you're really forced to think out of the box and be creative and be resourceful and be resilient. And you know, for me, it paid dividends going through the MW program, but I think it also pays dividends in just life in general.
Very cool. Thank you. If people wanted to support your channel or if they wanted to reach out to you and learn more about you and things, what would be best ways for them to see your videos and reach out and connect to you?
So on YouTube, you can find me by looking up Bob Polinsky, Master of Wine. If you comment there, I do my best to follow up.
I'm testament
Generally,
to that because I commented it, and that's I think how we started. So
all right.
I'm
Well,
proof
you
positive
know,
of that statement.
I I try to stay with it. But yeah, you can contact me through the channel. If you have any questions about wine, I'm happy to to answer things the best I can. Um, you know, if you have any ideas and hey, maybe this is something that would be a worthy video topic. I mean, whatever it is, you just want to reach out and say hi. Um, through the channel, it would be very easy. Yes.
Very cool. Well, I have a funny feeling that there's people are going to ask me a lot of questions. Why didn't you ask him this? Why didn't you ask him this? And it's probably going to be like, what is your favorite wine? All that kind of stuff. I think we should save that for another time and maybe even do like a virtual tasting where we can walk through some of this stuff. I think that might be cool too. So
You know, virtual tasting would be a lot of fun. Uh, we could set it up beforehand, maybe three wines. You and I could be tasting the same wines together.
I think that would be very cool. So let's definitely put that on the radar.
Yeah, you got it. Sounds good.
Bob, listen, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it, and I really look forward to doing some more of these things with you.
Hey, this was a lot of fun. Much appreciated. Thank you.
You got it.